The whisper came first. "She shouldn't be here," said the attorney, his voice sharp but quiet enough to pretend it wasn't meant to be heard. Rainwater clung to Maya Thompson's sneakers as she stepped into the grand hallway of Hollingsworth and Crane, one of the oldest law firms in the city. The marble floor reflected the chandelier's light like a pool of cold water, and each squeak of her shoes echoed through the room like an unwanted reminder that she didn't belong. The scent of polished leather, ink, and privilege filled the air, thick enough to taste. Every head turned toward her, suits, pearls, perfect hair. Not one face familiar. She clutched her worn satchel a little tighter and reminded herself why she came. Her invitation had been real. Heavy paper, gold seal, signed by Lydia Crane, the attorney overseeing the estate of Evelyn Hollingsworth, one of the wealthiest philanthropists in the state. But the receptionist's icy smile made it clear that the invitation didn't mean acceptance. "Please have a seat near the back," she said, her voice smooth but hollow. "The family will begin shortly." Maya nodded and sat far from the long table where the real attendees gathered, the kind of people who never needed to wonder if they belonged anywhere. She was only 17. A high school senior from the Eastwood district, the neighborhood people like the Hollingsworths preferred to drive around instead of through. She had never seen so much marble, let alone sat in a room worth more than her entire apartment building. She could feel eyes on her, weighing, questioning, doubting. But she also felt something else. A quiet steadiness inside her. A memory of the woman who had brought her here in the first place, Evelyn Hollingsworth. 6 months earlier, Maya had met her at the Eastwood Community Library. Evelyn had been 76, elegant yet disarmingly kind, volunteering to teach art history to underprivileged students. Most came for the snacks and certificates. Maya came for the conversations. Evelyn noticed her on the first day. "You take notes like a scholar," she'd said with a warm smile. "Tell me, what do you see when you look at that painting?" Maya hesitated. "A story," she said finally. "But it's told in symbols." Evelyn's eyes sparkled. "Good. Always look beyond the frame, child. Truth hides where people stop looking." That was the beginning. Their conversation soon stretched beyond art, to history, literature, and the unspoken architecture of power. Evelyn had seen something rare in Maya, a mind that not only remembered but questioned. "You have a memory like a mirror," she told her once. "But don't let others use it to see only themselves. Use it to remember what they want to forget." Now, sitting in that sterile boardroom, Maya heard those words echo again. The smell of rain clung to her clothes. Her notebook, filled with pages of notes from those afternoons, rested in her lap like a small shield. The heavy oak door opened, and Robert Crane, senior attorney and executor of the will, walked in. His suit was tailored to intimidation, his smile built for winning cases. Behind him came Charles Hollingsworth, Evelyn's stepson, heir apparent and self-proclaimed protector of the family's reputation. "Maya Thompson?" Crane said, finally noticing her. His brow furrowed as if her name were an inconvenience. "I believe there's been some sort of clerical error. This proceeding is for family and designated beneficiaries only." The room went silent. Maya's heart thudded, but her voice stayed steady. "There's no error," she said, pulling the envelope from her bag. "Mrs. Hollingsworth asked me to be here. It's her handwriting." Crane took the letter, glancing briefly before passing it to Charles. "This is unusual," he muttered. "Perhaps a misunderstanding." Mrs. Hollingsworth was declining in health toward the end. Charles chuckled softly, the kind of laugh meant to bruise. "Look, sweetheart, I'm sure Evelyn liked you. She liked to do charity work. But this isn't that kind of meeting." Maya's throat tightened, but she held her ground. "She said I'd understand something today. That's why I came." Crane exchanged a look with Charles, then offered a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, I suppose there's no harm in letting you sit quietly as long as you don't interrupt." He gestured to the farthest corner. Maya sat down again, her pulse in her ears. The whisper returned sharper this time. "She's just here for attention." But Maya wasn't there for attention. She was there for answers. The reading began. Crane's voice carried the rehearsed weight of tradition. He spoke of Evelyn's legacy, her philanthropy, her late husband's banking empire, her love of the arts. He made sure to mention everything that looked good in print, and quietly skipped over the parts that didn't. As he spoke, Maya studied every face. Charles, smug in his chair. His wife Vanessa distracted, already daydreaming of furniture replacements. And Margaret Crane, Robert's daughter and junior partner, typing notes on her laptop with visible impatience. None of them seemed to grieve. They were just waiting for numbers, for their portions of Evelyn's fortune. Maya thought back to a rainy afternoon in the library. Evelyn had once said, "Money is a mirror, Maya. It shows you what people value most, not in what they give, but in what they refuse to lose." She hadn't understood it then, but now as she watched the heirs lean forward at every mention of property, she did. Crane cleared his throat and began reading. To my stepson, Charles Hollingsworth, I leave my residence on Rivergate Avenue and all its contents. Charles smiled faintly. Vanessa exhaled in relief. To the Hollingsworth Foundation, I bequeath a majority of my investments for continued philanthropic operations under existing management. And then, silence. Crane turned a page. His confident tone faltered. Additionally, there appears to be mention of a separate trust, though the document referencing it seems to be misplaced. Margaret frowned. Misplaced? Charles leaned forward. You mean missing? Temporarily, Crane replied, forcing a smile. A minor clerical issue. Nothing concerning. But Maya noticed his hand, trembling slightly as he slipped a few papers under the table and into his briefcase. She knew that movement. It was the same way people hid truth when they thought no one remembered. Evelyn's words surfaced again, calm but clear. The powerful assume no one is paying attention to the details, and Maya was paying attention. The tension in the room thickened. Charles's impatience flared. Just move on. The rest can be sorted later. But Margaret wasn't convinced. Maybe the digital copy's available, she said, opening her laptop. Her fingers tapped rapidly. The faint blue glow of the screen lit her face. Here it is. The last update 3 months ago. As Crane resumed reading from the screen, Maya noticed something strange. The dates didn't match what he'd read before. Excuse me, she said softly. The execution date, it's different. The printed one said March 15th. That one says January 4th. Crane paused, startled for a second before covering it with a smile. Legal drafts often have revisions. It's common, Charles' voice rose. Why is she even still here? This isn't a civics class. It's a will reading. I'll stay, Maya said, calm but firm. Mrs. Hollingsworth wanted me here for all of it. Her tone silenced the room. Crane's smile thinned. Very well. But do try to remain quiet. These are complicated legal matters. Maya opened her notebook and began to write. Every word, every inconsistency, every lie disguised as etiquette. And she didn't yet know it, but in that moment, the balance of power had already begun to shift. Robert Crane adjusted his tie as though tightening control over the room. We'll continue, he said. His voice returned to its polished rhythm, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. The next half hour passed in a blur of legal terms and practiced civility. Crane's words painted Evelyn Hollingsworth as a saint of philanthropy, a woman who gave without question and trusted those around her completely. But Maya knew better. Evelyn had been kind, yes, but never naive. She trusted people only after watching how they behaved when they thought no one was looking. The longer the reading went on, the clearer it became that something was wrong. The missing document wasn't a clerical error. It was deliberate. Crane avoided eye contact with Margaret, whose fingers hovered uncertainly over her keyboard. Charles poured himself another glass of scotch and smirked every time a new asset was mentioned. Maya kept writing. Her pen didn't pause even once. Every tremor in Crane's hand, every glance between him and Charles, every name he skimmed over instead of reading aloud, it all went into the notebook. Evelyn had once told her that power leaves fingerprints. You just need to know where to dust for them. Finally, Crane closed the folder. That concludes the official reading of the will, he announced. Some administrative clarifications may follow, but for now, the primary beneficiaries are identified. Charles leaned back, satisfied. So we're done here? Crane hesitated, glancing toward Maya. Almost. Miss Thompson, I appreciate your patience. I realize this must have been overwhelming. To avoid any awkwardness, the firm is prepared to offer you a small token for your time and travel. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a check already signed. $500. Maya looked at it but didn't touch it. Why would I need compensation? Because, Crane replied smoothly. Mrs. Hollingsworth's note inviting you here likely stemmed from affection, not legal obligation. This will ensure we close the matter respectfully. Charles chuckled. Consider it a scholarship for showing up. Maya didn't move. Her fingers rested lightly on the notebook in her lap. Mrs. Hollingsworth told me she had something important to tell me after she was gone. She made me promise to come. Charles set down his glass with a thud. You've had your moment, kid. Go home before this turns embarrassing. Charles, Margaret said sharply. It was the first time her voice held any edge. If Evelyn wanted her here, we should respect that. What harm can it do? Crane forced a smile. None, of course. He slipped the check back into his pocket. Miss Thompson, you're welcome to stay as we finalize signatures. The others returned to their papers. Maya sat still, heart pounding, pretending to read her notes while her mind replayed every conversation she'd had with Evelyn. The way Evelyn's gaze would sharpen whenever the Hollingsworth Foundation came up. The way she'd once said, "Justice doesn't vanish, Maya, it waits." Sometimes in the smallest detail. Her eyes drifted to Crane's briefcase, the missing pages, the tremor in his hand, the detail Evelyn had prepared her to notice. She waited. When the others rose to stretch during a brief recess, Maya stayed seated. Through the cracked door, she heard voices from the adjoining office. Crane's low and urgent, Charles's rough with irritation. She can't stay, Charles hissed. You should have stopped this the moment she walked in. I'm handling it, Crane said. The codicil isn't in the file. I'll say it was an administrative oversight. No one will question it. You'd better be right. If that girl opens her mouth about anything, you and I both... Their voices dropped again, muffled but tense. Maya's pulse quickened. Codicil. That was the missing document. Evelyn had mentioned that word once, half-jokingly, when Maya asked why she wrote everything down by hand instead of on a computer. Because I don't trust digital ink, Evelyn had said, and because codicils make men nervous. Now Maya understood why. The door opened. Charles walked out first, adjusting his cufflinks, and froze when he saw her still sitting there. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Enjoying the show? Just listening, she said softly. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're smart. That's obvious. So be smart enough to know when to leave a room. Maya held his gaze. Mrs. Hollingsworth told me to stay in the room until the end. For a brief moment, surprise flickered across his face. Then he laughed, a short, cold sound, and walked away. Crane emerged next, his composure restored. Everything in order, he said to no one in particular, then took his seat again. Shall we conclude? The others gathered around the table. Margaret resumed typing. Vanessa idly scrolled her phone. The atmosphere was lighter, but only on the surface. Maya could feel something unraveling beneath it. As Crane prepared the final signatures, she noticed him open his briefcase again. The missing pages were still inside. He slipped them deeper, almost casually, but she saw the edge of the paper, Evelyn's distinct handwriting, looping and precise. Maya stood. Excuse me, she said. You missed something, Crane blinked. I beg your pardon? The codicil. It's right there. You just put it away. The room froze. Margaret looked up. Charles's face hardened. That's quite an accusation, Crane said, his tone sharp now. You may not understand how these proceedings work. I understand perfectly, Maya said. Mrs. Hollingsworth told me you'd try to hide it. A murmur spread around the table. Crane's jaw tightened. Miss Thompson, I will not tolerate disrespect in a legal setting. Maya opened her notebook, turning to a page near the back. On March 10th, she told me, and I quote, they'll try to keep what was meant to heal from ever seeing the light. I wrote it down. Every word she said I wrote down. Margaret stared at her, visibly unsettled. You wrote down everything? Yes, Maya replied. Because she asked me to remember what others choose to forget. Silence fell. Crane stood abruptly. This is becoming inappropriate. We'll take a recess. Charles followed him out, muttering under his breath. Vanessa avoided eye contact. Margaret stayed seated, watching Maya. You really think she left something for you? Margaret asked quietly. I don't think, Maya said. I know. Margaret studied her for a long moment, then closed her laptop. If you're right, you'll need more than memory. You'll need proof. I already have it, Maya said, but her voice trembled slightly. She didn't know if she was convincing Margaret or herself. When the room emptied again, Maya sat alone in the thick, humming silence. The rain had started again outside, soft against the windows. She reached into her bag and pulled out the envelope Evelyn had given her months ago with careful instructions. Open only if they try to change my wishes. Her hand shook as she broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small flash drive wrapped in tissue. The letter began, "My dear Maya, if you're reading this, it means they did exactly what I feared. Robert Crane and Charles have hidden the document naming you trustee of the Hollingsworth Justice Fund. The flash drive contains their financial misconduct. It is not just my money they wish to protect, it is the legacy of harm that built it. Do not let them bury the truth. Use what you remember. Use what I've given you." Maya exhaled slowly. The rain sounded louder now. She looked at the flash drive resting in her palm. Tiny, weightless. Yet it felt heavier than everything in the room combined. She wasn't just a witness anymore. She was the key to everything Evelyn had built, and everything these men had tried to destroy. The door creaked. Someone was coming back. Maya closed her hand around the flash drive. Her next move would decide everything, and she wasn't about to forget a single detail. Charles stepped back into the conference room first, his expression polished but tight around the eyes. Behind him came Robert Crane, holding a folder that looked thinner than before. They stopped when they saw Maya still sitting in her chair, calm, notebook open, pen poised. "Miss Thompson," Crane said with forced cheer, "I hope you've had a chance to collect yourself. These proceedings can be overwhelming for those unfamiliar with estate law." Maya smiled faintly. "I'm fine. I was just reading Mrs. Hollingsworth's letter again. It's amazing how much truth can fit into one page." Crane's composure faltered for a split second. Charles poured himself another drink. "Enough with the theatrics. Let's wrap this up so we can all move on." "Of course," Crane said. He set the folder on the table, keeping a hand over it like a guard dog protecting its bone. "As I was saying, with the absence of the codicil, the main allocations stand as read. There are no additional beneficiaries." Maya leaned forward slightly. "Are you sure about that?" He gave her a long look. "Quite sure." "Then you won't mind if I read a section of Mrs. Hollingsworth's will from memory," Maya said. "I might not know estate law, but I do know her handwriting. Every word of it." Charles laughed, but it sounded brittle. "What are you going to do, recite the whole thing? You were barely part of her life. I spent more time with her in 6 months than you did in 6 years, Maya said evenly, and she made sure I remembered everything. Before Crane could stop her, she began to speak. "I, Evelyn Hollingsworth, being of sound mind and purpose, do hereby establish the Hollingsworth Justice Fund. 50% of my liquid assets will be dedicated to supporting communities historically harmed by the financial policies that built the Hollingsworth fortune." The words fell into the room like stones, into deep water. Crane went still. Charles's drink paused halfway to his lips. "Those are not the words in the official record," Crane said quietly. "No," Maya replied, "not the version you're holding." Margaret returned at that moment, laptop in hand, her expression unreadable. "I found something," she said. "An older draft in the digital archives. It matches exactly what she just recited." Crane turned sharply. "That file was sealed." "Not anymore," Margaret said. "Evelyn sent me access months ago, said I might need it one day." She glanced at Maya. "I didn't know what she meant until now." Charles slammed his glass onto the table. "You can't just take the word of some kid over the official executor." Maya stood. "You can call me whatever you want. But Mrs. Hollingsworth trusted me to remember. She knew what you'd do." Crane's face hardened. "Enough of this. Miss Thompson, you are overstepping your place. I have served this family for 40 years. "And yet," Maya said, her voice calm, "you didn't see her for the last 6 months of her life." "I did. I was there when she signed the original documents. I was there when she said justice should not die with her." The silence that followed was thick, electric. Margaret broke it first. "Robert, is there a reason that codicil never made it into the official record?" Crane's mouth tightened. There was confusion regarding Mrs. Hollingsworth's state of mind. She was elderly, emotional. "She was lucid," Maya interrupted. "She could quote dates, bank transactions, and trust numbers better than you can." Charles shot to his feet. "You're accusing us of fraud now?" Maya met his glare steadily. I'm stating facts. And I have evidence. She pulled the small flash drive from her pocket and placed it on the table. Mrs. Hollingsworth documented everything: audio files, correspondence, financial ledgers. This drive contains it all. If I disappear, it goes to the district attorney's office automatically. Charles stared at it, then at her. You're bluffing. I'm not. Robert Crane's voice softened, the way a predator's might before it strikes. Maya, you must understand what you're doing. If you make false allegations against this firm or the Hollingsworth family, the consequences could be severe. Only if they're false, she said. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice uncertain. Robert, is she telling the truth? Crane didn't answer. That silence said more than words ever could. Margaret exhaled slowly. Evelyn named her trustee, didn't she? That's why you hid the codicil. Crane didn't deny it. He just pressed his fingertips together and said, even if that were the case, she's a minor. The court would never approve it. Actually, Maya said, retrieving a folded document from her notebook. Mrs. Hollingsworth already arranged that too. She handed it to Margaret. It was a certified letter from the court, proof of her legal emancipation filed 6 weeks before Evelyn's death. Margaret scanned it, then looked up. It's legitimate, Charles exploded. This is insane. You can't expect anyone to believe that Evelyn left control of millions to some girl from Eastwood. Why not? Maya said softly. That's where her money came from. From redline neighborhoods, from people who were told no at her bank's counters for decades. She wanted to make it right. The words landed like thunder. Even Vanessa looked shaken. Crane rubbed his temples, his confidence unraveling. You can't possibly understand the complexities of running a foundation of that size. Maybe not yet, Maya said, but I know how to tell the truth, and I know how to remember it. Charles paced the room, muttering curses under his breath. Then he stopped suddenly and turned back toward her. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You think you can win this? Do you have any idea what you're walking into? I'm walking into exactly what Mrs. Hollingsworth prepared me for, she said. And I'm not walking out until her wishes are honored. For a moment, no one spoke. The storm outside had grown louder, wind rattling the windows, thunder rolling above the city. Finally, Margaret closed her laptop. Robert, we need to call the board. If what she's saying is true, the firm could face criminal exposure. Crane's jaw tightened. This matter will not leave this room. It already has, Maya said quietly. Mrs. Hollingsworth planned for that too. Every eye turned toward her. She reached into her bag again and placed another envelope on the table, addressed to the district attorney, sealed and signed by Evelyn herself. She told me to deliver this if anyone tried to silence me, Maya said. It contains everything she found about how the Hollingsworth Foundation was used to funnel money out of community programs and into private accounts. Vanessa went pale. Charles, is that true? He didn't answer. Crane's mask finally cracked. You have no idea what you're doing, girl. I do, Maya said. I'm doing exactly what she taught me to do. Remember. Thunder boomed above them, shaking the light fixtures. The tension in the room snapped like an overstretched wire. Charles snatched the flash drive off the table. If this is what you want, fine. I'll make sure it disappears myself. Maya didn't flinch. Then I'll make sure the backup gets delivered. What backup? The one Evelyn gave to her personal lawyer. The one she said would destroy anyone who tried to alter her will. For the first time, fear crossed Charles's face. You're lying. Maya's eyes didn't move from his. No, I'm remembering. And that was when Margaret's phone buzzed. She looked down, read the message, and went still. It's from Daniel Chen, she said slowly. Evelyn's personal attorney. He says he's on his way here with the original codicil. The color drained from Crane's face. Maya sat back down, calm again. Then let's wait. I'd like to see how the story ends. No one moved. The storm raged outside, lightning flashing against the tall glass windows. But the true storm was inside that room, gathering, silent, and unstoppable. Evelyn had said that memory is power. And now, Maya could feel that power rising in her chest, steady and unstoppable, waiting to rewrite everything they thought they could control. The wind pressed hard against the tall windows as footsteps echoed from the hallway. Every sound made the room tense tighter. Then the door opened, and Daniel Chen stepped inside, shaking off his umbrella. He wasn't tall or imposing, but the quiet certainty in his eyes made everyone else seem smaller. He held a waterproof briefcase in one hand. "Apologies for the delay," he said calmly. Traffic was impossible. His gaze swept the room, landing on Robert Crane last. "I trust you've kept things orderly." Crane's smile was brittle. "We were just concluding, actually." Daniel nodded once. "Good. Then this should take only a few minutes." He opened the briefcase, revealing several neatly sealed folders. Mrs. Hollingsworth anticipated that her final wishes might face resistance. She left instructions with my office to deliver the original codicil and supporting documents directly if that occurred. The color drained from Crane's face. "That wasn't necessary, Daniel. You should have consulted with me first. I'm the executor." Daniel's eyes didn't waver. "And I'm the co-counsel she trusted to verify your execution." Charles leaned forward, his voice rising. "This is absurd." My stepmother was confused. She didn't know what she was signing. Daniel opened the top folder and slid a document across the table. "Then you'll recognize her handwriting and her signature." Margaret looked down first. Her hand flew to her mouth. "It's dated after the version you read earlier," she said quietly, "and it names Maya Thompson as trustee of the Hollingsworth Justice Fund." The words landed like thunder. Crane tried to speak but only managed a dry rasp. "You don't understand. This would destroy the foundation structure." "It's impossible to implement." Daniel met his gaze coolly. "The law doesn't care about your comfort, Robert." Maya sat very still, the storm outside reflected in her eyes. She felt Evelyn's presence in the room, not as a ghost but as a steady current running beneath every heartbeat. This was what the woman had prepared her for. Charles slammed his palm on the table. "This is ridiculous. That girl manipulated an old woman. She's lying, all of her." "No," Daniel said evenly. "Evelyn anticipated that claim too. She recorded a video statement 3 weeks before her death." Vanessa gasped. "There's a video?" Without waiting for permission, Daniel opened his tablet and pressed play. Evelyn's face filled the screen. Older, pale, but still luminous, her silver hair pinned neatly behind her ears. The room went silent except for her voice. "If you're watching this, I imagine there has been some resistance to my choices," Evelyn began, her tone steady but cutting. "Let me be clear. I was of sound mind. Every decision I made deliberately. For too long, the Hollingsworth name has been a monument built on silence. The Justice Fund is meant to change that. It will be led by Maya Thompson, whose memory and integrity are sharper than any lawyer I've met. She remembers everything, and that is what terrifies them." Crane looked away. Charles stared, jaw clenched as Evelyn's image continued. "To my family," she said, her gaze unflinching. "I leave enough for comfort, but not enough to corrupt. You mistook inheritance for entitlement. I intend to correct that." The video ended. The only sound for a moment was the rain on the glass. Margaret whispered, "She really meant it." Crane's mask cracked completely. "You can't let this stand. The optics, the truth," Daniel interrupted, "isn't negotiable." Maya leaned forward, her voice soft but steady. "You said once that power leaves fingerprints, Mr. Crane. Evelyn's left hers everywhere. You tried to wipe them away, but she kept the original safe." Charles rounded on her. "You think this makes you powerful? You have no idea what you're dealing with. The board will never approve you. You'll be chewed up and forgotten by the time this goes public." "Maybe," Maya said, "but even if I fall, her truth will still stand. That's the difference between legacy and ownership." Daniel handed her a pen. "Evelyn wanted you to sign the acceptance of trusteeship yourself. Once you do, it becomes legally binding." Her hand trembled slightly as she took the pen. The moment stretched long and quiet. Every eye in the room was on her. Then slowly and with certainty she signed her name. It was done. Charles exhaled a low, furious breath. "You just ruined generations of work." "No," Maya said. "I just turned it into something worth keeping." He took a step toward her, but Daniel moved between them. "That's enough." The older man's calm authority froze Charles mid-step. Margaret rose next, closing her laptop with a final click. "I'll draft the transition paperwork," she said. "And I'll notify the board." Crane's voice dropped to a whisper. "Margaret, you can't." "I can," she said, meeting his eyes. "And I will. I won't lose my career over your lies." Vanessa quietly took her purse, her expression unreadable. "Charles, I'm leaving," she said softly. "You can keep your money. I'm done living inside a story that was never honest." He didn't look at her. Daniel gathered the signed pages and locked them back into his case. The district attorney will also receive copies of all evidence tomorrow morning, he said. This will proceed with or without your cooperation. Crane collapsed into his chair, deflated. The man who had once commanded rooms with his voice now stared at his own trembling hands. Maya closed her notebook and stood. Mrs. Hollingsworth said people show their true character when they think no one's watching. I think she just made sure the whole world is. The lights flickered once as thunder rolled again. The storm outside had begun to ease, but the damage inside the room was permanent. Margaret glanced toward Maya. What happens now? Now, Maya said. We start rebuilding what she wanted to repair. She reached for the flash drive still on the table and slipped it into her pocket. This doesn't end with me sitting in a fancy office. It ends when the people her money hurt finally have a voice. Daniel gave a faint smile. She'd be proud, Maya nodded. She'd say it's about time. As she left the room, the air felt lighter, as if the house itself had exhaled for the first time in years. Behind her, Crane muttered to himself, the sound of a man watching his empire dissolve. Outside, the rain had slowed to a soft drizzle. Maya stepped onto the wet pavement, looking up at the gray sky. The city stretched before her, flawed, bruised, but alive. She whispered to the air, We remember Evelyn. Every detail. But even as she said it, she knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The real test wouldn't be in exposing corruption. It would be in transforming it. And power never surrendered without a fight. She took one last look at the towering building behind her, its name etched in marble, already fading in the rain. Then she walked away, carrying the weight of a legacy that had finally changed hands. Tomorrow, the headlines would ignite. But tonight, for the first time, truth had won its place at the table. Morning broke over the city in a pale wash of gold, touching the glass towers and crumbling brownstones alike. The storm had rinsed everything clean, but the headlines that spread across screens and newspapers that day left no doubt. Hidden codicil names, teen trustee of billion-dollar fund. Reporters swarmed the steps of Hollingsworth and Crane before the sun even fully rose. Cameras flashed. Voices shouted her name. But Maya stayed inside, calm behind the glass of Daniel Chen's office. Her notebook lay open in front of her, its pages filled with Evelyn's words, the ones that had brought everything to light. Daniel watched her quietly. They'll want interviews, statements, commentary. You'll need to be careful what you say. Maya looked up from the notebook. I know what to say. I'll tell the truth, he smiled faintly. That's what she would have said. By noon, the board meeting of the Hollingsworth Foundation convened in a smaller, colder room. Gone were the champagne and polite smiles. Every director's face carried a different emotion: shock, anger, disbelief. Margaret sat near the head of the table, posture straight, eyes steady. When she introduced Maya as the new trustee of the Hollingsworth Justice Fund, no one clapped. But no one dared object either. Maya stood and faced them. This fund isn't about charity, she said, her voice quiet but unshakable. It's about correction. The wealth that built this family came from exclusion. We're not here to bury that truth. We're here to fix what can still be fixed. A few directors exchanged uncomfortable glances. One cleared his throat. You're very young, Miss Thompson. Are you sure you understand the magnitude of what you're undertaking? Maya nodded once. Yes, because the people who were excluded understood it their whole lives. They didn't need an education in magnitude, they lived it. No one spoke after that. Margaret pressed her lips together, hiding what might have been a smile. The motion passed. The fund was ratified under new leadership. Outside, protesters and supporters gathered in equal measure. Some held signs praising Evelyn's vision. Others accused Maya of manipulation. She walked through them silently, head high, ignoring both the praise and the hate. Evelyn had taught her that integrity meant staying steady between the two. Weeks passed. The chaos of scandal slowly gave way to structure. The Hollingsworth Justice Fund opened, its first office in a refurbished bank building on the edge of the Eastwood district, the same neighborhood that had once been denied loans by Evelyn's late husband's company. The sign above the door read, Hollingsworth Center for Equity. Inside, people lined up to apply for small business grants and housing support. Legal counselors filled the old teller booths. The air buzzed with something new. possibility. On opening day, Maya stood in the main hall, sunlight streaming across the tiled floor. Reporters gathered again, but this time she wasn't a mystery. She was the face of a movement Evelyn had set in motion decades ago. 5 months ago, Maya began. I sat in a boardroom where people told me I didn't belong. They were wrong. The truth belongs wherever injustice has lived too long. Today, this building will serve as proof that memory is not weakness. It's power. Applause rippled through the crowd. Margaret stood in the back, clapping quietly beside Daniel. Even Vanessa Hollingsworth appeared, her expression solemn but peaceful. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Maya found herself standing alone in what used to be the bank manager's office. The walls were freshly painted, but she could still see the faint outline where portraits of old bankers once hung. Evelyn's portrait now took their place. Not in grandeur, but in quiet grace, her eyes calm, her smile knowing. Maya touched the frame lightly. You did it, she whispered. You turned memory into justice. But even as she said it, she knew the work was only beginning. In the months that followed, the Justice Fund transformed the city's forgotten corners. Dozens of small businesses opened in neighborhoods long left behind. Families kept their homes instead of losing them to predatory loans. Scholarships went to students who had once been told college wasn't for them. Every report, every number, every success, Maya wrote it down, the same way she had written Evelyn's lessons, but not everyone celebrated. Former board members, corporate allies, and old families whispered behind closed doors, calling her a disruption, a symbol of misplaced guilt. Anonymous letters arrived at her apartment, filled with threats and insults. Maya kept them all in a folder marked Fear's Record. She refused to throw them away. Fear, too, was proof of change. One afternoon, months after the launch, she met Daniel at the old law firm, now nearly deserted. Hollingsworth and Crane had collapsed under investigation, its name removed from the building. Only the ghost of its letters remained faintly visible on the stone. They called you impossible, Daniel said as they stood outside. Now they're calling you inevitable, Maya smiled. Evelyn said truth always starts as an interruption. Daniel nodded. What will you do next? Expand the initiative, she said. Not just here, everywhere. There are more cities built on forgotten stories. He gave her a small bow. Then remember them all. Years passed and the Hollingsworth Justice Fund became a national model. Universities taught its policies. Other foundations followed its example. And every time a new program opened, a framed copy of Evelyn's words hung near the entrance. Memory is power. The ability to remember what others choose to forget is how justice survives. On the 5th anniversary of the fund's founding, Maya returned to Evelyn's grave. The cemetery was quiet, blanketed with autumn leaves. She knelt and placed fresh white lilies beside the stone. The same fountain pen Evelyn had once given her rested in her hand, still shining faintly from years of use. They still ask me how I did it, she said softly. But it was never me alone. It was the truth refusing to stay buried. A breeze lifted her hair, warm against her face. She smiled. They tried to hide your will, she said, her voice low but clear. But your name, your purpose, was written on every page. She placed the pen beside the flowers and stood, the sun breaking through the clouds just long enough to light the marble with a soft golden glow. As she walked away, the wind stirred again, scattering the fallen leaves across the grass. For a moment the pen glinted brightly as if answering her. Then the light faded and the world settled into its new rhythm, a world changed not by force, but by remembrance. And far beyond that quiet grave, in offices, classrooms, and homes, people spoke Evelyn's name, not as a symbol of wealth, but as the beginning of a new story. A story that started with one young girl who refused to forget, because remembering when everyone else chooses silence is how history finally learns to breathe again. Years passed before the city realized how much had changed. Streets that once stood silent now pulsed with voices and color. Murals of justice covering walls where old advertisements used to fade in the sun. The Hollingsworth Justice Fund had grown beyond what even Evelyn could have imagined. No longer a single foundation, but a movement. Chapters sprouted in cities across the country, each led by people who had once been denied a seat at any table. Maya had become something of a legend, though she hated the word. To her, she was still the girl who wrote everything down so she wouldn't forget. She carried Evelyn's pen everywhere, tucked into the inside pocket of her blazer like a small heartbeat of purpose. Every week she returned to Eastwood, meeting people face to face, remembering their names, their fears, their hopes. On an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, she walked through the renovated community center, formerly one of Hollingsworth Bank's foreclosure offices. The tiled floors gleamed. The old teller counters had become desks for loan advisors, who now helped families rebuild credit instead of destroying it. Children's laughter echoed down the halls where, years ago, paperwork and rejection letters had piled high. But change never came without cost. Behind every headline of progress lurked the backlash, anonymous threats, editorials calling her naive, politicians accusing her of dividing history instead of healing it. Every insult hardened her resolve a little more. She didn't fight them in print. She fought them in results. Each new home saved, each grant approved, each young woman who looked at her and saw possibility instead of exception. Then came the letter. It arrived without return address, slipped through the mail slot at the fund's headquarters late one evening. The paper was thick, the handwriting elegant and deliberate. Maya opened it cautiously. "You don't know me," the letter began, "but I knew Evelyn. I was her first clerk when she married Richard Hollingsworth. She used to say justice moves like water, slow, patient, unstoppable. I kept records you'll want to see. There are ledgers from 1954, showing how the bank profited from land seizures during redevelopment projects. They belong in your archive, not hidden in mine. I'm ready to tell the truth." The signature at the bottom read Amelia Drake, a name Maya recognized from one of Evelyn's early journal entries. She looked up, heart racing. This wasn't over. Evelyn's reach extended farther than anyone had guessed. 2 weeks later, Maya stood before a packed auditorium at the University of Fairview, delivering the keynote address at the National Symposium for Economic Truth and Reform. Cameras rolled. The crowd leaned forward, waiting. "When we started," Maya said, "they told us history couldn't be changed. They said red lines on old maps were permanent. But here we are, entire neighborhoods blooming where those lines once cut people out. Every home restored is a page rewritten. Every family thriving is proof that memory is not a wound. It's a guide." Applause thundered through the hall, but she held up her hand. "And we're not finished. Because justice isn't a finish line. It's a practice. One that begins again every morning we wake up and refuse to forget." That night, after the lights faded and the audience scattered into the city, she returned to her small apartment overlooking Eastwood Park. The skyline glimmered in the distance, the same skyline Evelyn used to watch from her mansion on the hill. Maya smiled faintly. Time had tilted the view. What was once seen from above was now being built from below. She sat at her desk, opened her notebook, and wrote in neat, careful lines. "Justice isn't born in boardrooms. It grows where memory takes root. Evelyn planted it in me. Now it grows in everyone who remembers what was taken and dares to rebuild it anyway." The next morning brought breaking news. Federal investigators had uncovered a network of banks across the country using similar discriminatory practices. An investigation launched after the Hollingsworth Fund's Open Archive project published its data online. The findings would lead to the largest restitution case in banking history. Maya stood by her window as the world caught up to the truth Evelyn had known decades earlier. Reporters called it the reckoning of red lines. Maya called it what it really was, proof that remembering works. That evening she returned to Evelyn's grave again, the city quiet around her. She placed another white lily beside the headstone and set a second pen next to the first one she'd left years before. "We're still writing," she said softly. "But this time the ink doesn't fade." The air was still. The faint chime of a church bell drifted through the wind. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling both the past and the future balanced perfectly in her chest. Evelyn had once said that the most dangerous people are those who remember everything. But Maya knew the truth. The most powerful are the ones who choose what not to forget. As she walked away, the city lights shimmered behind her, reflected in puddles from a light rain. Somewhere in that glow, a new generation was already beginning to ask the right questions, opening their notebooks, writing their own stories. The legacy had finally completed its circle. The girl who was never supposed to belong had rewritten the inheritance of an entire city, and this time no one could erase her name from the pages.